Whatever.
We had a unique experience in having two Kleins in the shop at the same time, so thought we'd share a little bit about them. There's a wonderful book published, The Art That Sings, by Paul Schmidt. And if you want a lot of really good detail, history, background, and influence on Steve Cline and his work, it's in this book. All we wanted to go over was some of the kind of fun, unique, and really different aspects of these guitars. This one, Brazilian rosewood with an rosewood neck, if you can see the grain in there, and a redwood top. This particular one was actually made by Steve Kaufman. It's a Klein design, of course, but this one was made entirely by Steve Kaufman. Steve Kaufman met Steve Cline in 1979. They eventually started working together. And this is kind of a more recent outcome of that collaboration. It has all the earmarks of a Cline, but it was actually done by Steve Kaufman's hands. There is an earlier version, an M43. As Klein designs go, this one is interesting. They've been producing these for some time. But this version of a Klein design is really made for the working musician. And we find the design solutions incredibly clever. It has a trapdoor down at the pickup end. And in fact, when this guitar first came into the shop, not knowing the guitar at all, we changed out the undersaddle pickup in less than 2.5 minutes. The end piece is possible because there's no heel per se. The guitar is braced without it. So you can literally get your entire hand into the guitar that way. This particular pickup is a Trans Audio, a 13-pin, and even that is installed with tremendous ease. Steve simplified his bridge. The traditional bridges that he had made were about as complex as a bridge could be. This is even a simpler version. The earlier versions of this have separate saddles for each string. But for the working musician, since most pickups have a single saddle, they redesigned the bridge for the saddle. Notice that the strings are entirely on top, held by pins. The bridge plate underneath is engaged to the tone bars going off in each direction, and the tone bars are actually sized and shaped for the different frequencies. This is a variation of the Kasha bracing design. Now, Kasha himself actually was more interested in nylon string guitars, but one of the genius aspects of the Steve Cline guitars is Steve Cline took Kasha's design ideas and started applying them to steel string, and by golly, they work pretty well. The neck is bolted on to the top. Notice no through heel. And in fact, the strength for it is by a braced block underneath. And if you could see the joint in between, the fretboard actually floats just a little bit above the top. There is a truss rod per usual, and then a series of flying braces which strengthen the whole neck body intersection and make it possible not to have the traditional heel on the other end. All the strength is developed by the interaction of the braces. Notice the incredible back angle of the headstock. This works beautifully with the zero fret design. Now, the zero frets are not new. In fact, I believe they were originally developed by Selmer in the 1920s for what eventually became the gypsy jazz guitars. The beauty of a zero fret in manufacturing is you don't have to have a great deal of craftsmanship to get the strings to come out at the right height and all be in the right alignment with each other and have the right height above the rest of the frets. The zero fret is a slightly larger fret than the rest, and therefore it assures that the strings will have the right relationship. And all you need above them is something that will allow the string to be held in vertical position. So in other words, just a slight channel to keep the string placed. If you have more back angle on the neck, on the headstock at that point, it's a very smooth relationship between the guide and the zero fret. The zero fret came back to life in the 1950s when Chet Atkins was intrigued by the buttery feel of Selmer guitars and convinced Webster, the designer at Gretsch at that time, to use them on some of the Chet Atkins designed guitars that were produced throughout the 50s, right up through, I think, the 6119, when it came out in late 58, early 59. I could be off on the dates a little bit there. At any rate, by using that, these guitars also have that buttery playing feel. The strings feel as if they are an extension of one's hand. Notice also the degree of polish on the fretboard. The fretboard is polished to the point where it's as highly reflective as the finish of the guitar. It makes the feel of pulling a string really smooth. When Steve Kaufman did this guitar, notice he had the fan fret design. And what he did, which was incredibly subtle and brilliant, is the headstock, in order to make this work, is not only slightly with a heavy back pitch, but it actually follows the angle of the strings up at this end. So in fact, it's got a twist to it. And that keeps the string feel and pull being completely natural. When you're playing this guitar, the fan frets make no difference. Your fingers know where the notes is. You don't need to give any energy to finding the right spot. And in his current saddle design, the Kasha influence causes this end of the bridge to be larger because, of course, the lower notes have much longer wavelengths, longer frequencies, and the wider bridge distributes it out over a broader area to heavier tone bars and fewer tone bars on this side, allowing this side of the top to respond better to the low frequencies, whereas the bridge can get much smaller and more delicate where it needs to respond much faster to the shorter wavelength of the treble side. On Kaufman's version, notice the trapdoor is still there, but it's moved off to the side. Same concept. Makes it easy to get pickups in and out or do whatever else is necessary inside the guitar. Unique to have two Clines in at once, and they are fun to play.